The postcard arrived on a Tuesday. White sand beaches, azure waters, palm trees swaying in the breeze. A tropical paradise addressed to my wife from her real husband. That's when I learned that for the past decade, I'd been sharing Elizabeth with a man named David, who lived 300 miles away and thought he was her only husband. But that wasn't even the most devastating part. The real shock came when I turned the postcard over and read, "Can't wait to see you and our beautiful twins next week." I stood frozen in our kitchen, the cheerful Hawaiian postcard trembling in my hand. The words blurred before my eyes. "To my beloved wife, counting the days until you're back in my arms. Oh, my love, your real husband, David." My mind raced through a decade of memories with Elizabeth. Our wedding at the lakeside resort, buying our home, building my construction company while she managed the books. The business trips that grew longer over the years. The constant excuses for why we hadn't started a family yet. "Alex," Elizabeth's voice called from the hallway. "I'm home early." I slipped the postcard into my pocket, heart hammering against my ribs. How does one prepare to confront the person they love most about living a complete, double life? She entered the kitchen, setting down her purse and briefcase. Elizabeth was stunning as always in her tailored business suit, dark hair pulled back. In a sleek ponytail, red lipstick perfect, even after a day at work. My wife. Or was she? "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, moving to kiss me. I stepped back. "Who's David?" The color drained from her face so quickly, I thought she might faint. Her perfectly manicured hand gripped the counter. "What?" she whispered. "David, your real husband. The father of your children. Those twins I apparently know nothing about." Elizabeth's composure cracked. Her eyes darted toward the door as if calculating an escape route, but instead of running, she straightened her shoulders and looked directly at me. "I can explain everything." "Please do," I said, pulling out the postcard. "Explain how you've maintained 2 marriages for 10 years. Explain the children you had with another man while telling me you weren't ready. Explain how every month when you told me you were visiting your sick mother in Chicago, you were actually living as another man's wife." Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I met David before you. We were already married, but it was complicated. His family business was struggling, and there were some legal issues with his investors. Then I met you, and you were so kind, so successful. So you married me for my money?" The realization struck like a physical blow. "No. Well, not only that. I did fall in love with you, Alex. But David needed help, and I thought I could save his family's company if I had access to more resources." "My resources." "Yes," she admitted. "At first it was just going to be temporary. I would help David get back on his feet, then find a way to end things with him. But then I got pregnant. My knees weakened and I sank into a chair." "How old are they? These twins I never knew existed." "They're 7, she whispered. "A boy and a girl. James and Lily. 7 years. While I had been begging her to start a family, she'd been raising children with another man. And where does David think you go when you're with me? He thinks I work for a consulting firm that requires extensive travel. He has the kids when I'm gone." I laughed bitterly. "So he's a stay-at-home dad, supported by money from my construction company, the one you helped me run?" Her silence was confirmation enough. "How much of my money have you funneled to him over the years?" Elizabeth looked away. "The investments were legitimate. Your company funded several projects through David's family business. They've all performed well." Investments I knew nothing about. My voice had turned dangerous even to my own ears. "Alex, I know this is unforgivable, but we can work through this. I've been trying to find a way out for years. I just didn't want to hurt anyone." I stood up, my decision made. "Pack your things. You have 30 minutes to get out of my house." "Alex, please, where am I supposed to go? To your real husband, of course. To your children." The words tasted like acid. "I'm sure David will be delighted to have you home early." As she sobbed and pleaded, I walked to our home office and began changing passwords. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, the company's financial systems. Elizabeth had managed our books for years. God only knew how deeply she had embedded herself in my finances. While she frantically packed upstairs, I called my lawyer and left an urgent message. Then I called my best friend and business partner, Marcus. I need you at the office first thing tomorrow. Elizabeth's been embezzling funds. I need to know how bad it is. When Elizabeth came downstairs with her suitcases, her face was a mask of smeared makeup and desperation. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said. "There are things you don't know. I'm sure there are many things I don't know about you. That's the problem." As she stood on our doorstep, she made one last plea. "Alex, I really do love you. I—" closed the door in her face. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I drank bourbon and examined our wedding photos, searching for signs I'd missed. How had I been so blind? In the harsh light of morning, I made a decision. Elizabeth had methodically deceived me for a decade. Simple divorce wasn't enough. She deserved to lose everything, just as I had. But first, I needed to meet the other husband. Finding David wasn't difficult. Elizabeth's phone records showed countless calls to a number with a Minneapolis area code. Property records revealed a David Mercer who owned a modest home in a suburb there. Social media filled in the rest. David Mercer, 42, manager at a struggling manufacturing company that had miraculously found new investors 5 years ago. His profile picture showed a smiling man with Elizabeth and 2 dark-haired children at a lake, the same lake where Elizabeth and I had been married. 3 days after discovering my wife's betrayal, I stood on David Mercer's front porch watching children play in the yard next door. The house was well maintained, but nothing like the luxury home Elizabeth shared with me. Here, she was playing a different role altogether. David opened the door and I immediately recognized him from the photos. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of man you'd trust with your life, or your wife. "Can I help you?" he asked pleasantly. "Are you David Mercer?" "Yes," he said, curiosity evident on his face. "I'm Alex Reynolds, Elizabeth's husband." His expression didn't change immediately. Perhaps he thought I was a colleague or an acquaintance. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by confusion. "There must be some mistake. Elizabeth's maiden name is Parker. My wife is Elizabeth Mercer." I pulled out my phone and showed him a recent photo of Elizabeth and me at a charity gala. "This is my wife of 10 years, Elizabeth Reynolds." Previously, Elizabeth Parker. David's face drained of color. He gripped the doorframe. "This isn't possible." "May I come in? I think we have a lot to discuss." He nodded numbly and stepped aside. The interior of the house was warm and lived in, with children's toys scattered across the living room floor and family photos covering every surface. I picked up a framed picture from the mantel. Elizabeth in a hospital bed, holding newborn twins with David beaming proudly beside her. "When was this taken?" I asked. 7 years ago, David said, his voice hollow. "April 15th. I remembered that date. Elizabeth had told me she was attending a conference in Boston. She'd been gone for 2 weeks, claiming food poisoning had extended her trip. David sank onto the couch, staring at me as if I were an apparition. "How long have you been married?" 10 years next month." "You?" 12 years. He ran his hands through his hair. "This can't be happening. Elizabeth wouldn't. She couldn't." But the evidence was indisputable. We compared stories, dates, and photographs. Elizabeth had maintained 2 complete lives, 2 marriages, moving between Minneapolis and Boston with practiced ease. When she was being a devoted wife and mother to David and their twins, she told me she was visiting her sick mother or attending business conferences. When she was with me, she told David she was traveling for her consulting job. "The consulting job isn't real." David looked devastated. "She said she was working for McKinsey. She manages the finances for my construction company, or at least she did." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "She's been investing my money in your family business, apparently." David paled. Further, "The new investors 5 years ago, that was your money?" I nodded grimly. "It seems so." I had no idea. She said they were venture capitalists she'd met through her consulting work. He stood suddenly. "The children will be home from their play date soon. They can't see this, they can't know yet." As if on cue, we heard laughter approaching the front door. David moved quickly, intercepting the neighbor who had brought the twins home. I slipped into the kitchen, listening as he thanked her and sent the children upstairs to wash up before dinner. When he returned, his face had hardened. "Where is she now?" "I kicked her out 3 days ago. She hasn't contacted you." He shook his head. "She's supposed to be in Boston until Friday. With you, apparently." We sat in silence, two men processing. The same betrayal from different angles. Finally, David spoke again. "What do we do now?" "That depends," I said carefully. "Do you want her back?" His laugh was bitter. "Do you?" "No. Neither do I." David's eyes met mine, and I saw my own pain reflected there. She lied to both of us for over a decade. She used us. Then I suggested we make her regret it. As we talked late into the night after the twins were asleep, a plan began to form. Elizabeth had exploited us both, playing on our love and trust, while systematically bleeding my company to prop up David's family business. She deserved to lose it all. Both husbands, both homes, access to her children, and every penny she'd stolen. By morning, we had an understanding. David would pretend he knew nothing when Elizabeth returned from her business trip. I would begin the process of securing my company's assets and building a legal case against her. We would gather evidence, document everything, and when the time was right, spring the trap that would destroy Elizabeth's carefully constructed double life. As I left David's house, he gripped my hand firmly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "Me too," I replied. "She fooled us both." "Not anymore," he said, a new determination in his voice. Elizabeth called me the next day, her voice trembling with fake remorse. "Alex, please, can we talk about this? I know I've made terrible mistakes, but you have to believe me, I do love you." "Where are you staying?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "At a hotel downtown. I haven't told David anything yet. I need time to figure this out." So she was, lying to me already. According to David, she had arrived at their Minneapolis home that morning, claiming her business trip had ended early. She had hugged her children, kissed her husband, and slipped back into her role as Mrs. Mercer, without missing a beat. Teambeat. "Still processing everything," I said carefully. "But yes, maybe we should talk." Hope filled her voice. "Really? Oh, Alex, thank you. I promise I can explain everything." We arranged to meet at a restaurant the following evening. As soon as we hung up, I called David to update him. We were putting our plan into motion. Phase 1. Make Elizabeth believe she could salvage at least one of her marriages while we documented her every move. The restaurant I chose was upscale and dimly lit, perfect for the conversation we were about to have. Elizabeth arrived looking flawless as always, wearing a black dress I had bought her for our anniversary the previous year. When she leaned in to kiss me, I turned my head slightly so her lips grazed my cheek instead. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But 10 years is a long time to throw away without at least a conversation." Relief washed over her face. "I've been so afraid you'd never speak to me again." "I considered it," I said, taking a sip of water. But then I started thinking about the business, about our life together. I reached across the table and took her hand, about how much I still love you despite everything. Surprise flickered in her eyes, followed by calculation. She hadn't expected forgiveness so quickly. "Oh, Alex." Tears welled in her eyes, convincing tears. Elizabeth had always been an excellent actress. "I've made such a mess of everything. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did hurt me, Elizabeth. You lied about everything. You have children I've never met." She squeezed my hand. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me." "David, he was a mistake from the beginning, a youthful error that spiraled out of control. You're the one I want to be with. You're my real husband." I wondered if she was feeding David the exact same lines. The thought made me grip my glass so tightly I feared it might shatter. "What about the twins?" I asked. Her expression grew pained. "That's complicated. They're young. They don't need to know everything right away. Maybe eventually they could meet you, but for now, you'd continue lying to them," I finished. "Just like you'd continue lying to David." She looked down. I need time to untangle everything. David, he's not stable. If I told him about you, about us, I'm afraid of what he might do. He's had episodes before. Another lie. According to David, he had never had mental health issues. Elizabeth was already crafting a narrative that would allow her to manipulate both situations. "So what are you proposing?" I asked. "Give me 6 months," she said urgently. 6 months to gradually separate from David, to get the children used to the idea of their parents not being together. Then I can come home to you and we can start fresh. And during those 6 months, I'll split my time just like before. But you'll know the truth now. No more lies. I pretended to consider it, watching her eyes track my expressions. "The business is in trouble without you," I said finally. "Marcus and I have been going through the books. There are discrepancies we can't explain." Alarm flashed across her face. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Large transfers to accounts we can't identify. Investments I never authorized." "I can explain those," she said quickly. "They were legitimate business opportunities. Every penny has been accounted for." "Then you'll come to the office tomorrow? Help us sort it out?" "Of course," she agreed readily. "I'll be there first thing." We finished dinner with tentative reconciliation. She believed I was willing to take her back, willing to share her with another family for 6 more months, while she untangled her web of lies. As I watched her walk to her car, I felt nothing but cold determination. The woman I had loved was a fiction. This manipulative stranger deserved everything that was coming to her. The next day, Elizabeth spent hours at my office, carefully explaining away the financial irregularities Marcus and I had identified. She was convincing, showing how each transaction benefited my company, while conveniently omitting that they also pumped money into David's failing family business. My digital recorder captured every word as she unknowingly confessed to years of financial manipulation. That night, she returned to Minneapolis to her other husband and her children. According to David, she told him her consulting firm needed her for another project the following week, conveniently giving her time to spend with me in Boston. For the next month, we maintained the charade. Elizabeth believed she was successfully managing both relationships, unaware that David and I spoke daily, comparing notes and building our case against her. We documented her schedule, her lies, her financial maneuvers. My lawyer gathered evidence of embezzlement, while David's lawyer prepared custody filings. When Elizabeth was with me, I pretended to believe her promises of a future together. When she was with David, he played the role of unsuspecting husband. All the while, we watched her spin increasingly complex lies to cover her tracks. The most difficult part was witnessing her mothering through David's eyes. He would call me after she had spent the day with the twins, describing how naturally she moved between devoted mother and scheming adulteress. How she would tuck the children into bed, read them stories, kiss their foreheads, then slip into the bathroom to text me passionate messages about how much she missed me. "She's reading James and Lily, the same book she read to them last night," David told me during one such call, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Then she's planning to take a bath and call you. She told me she has a conference call with Tokyo." The intimacy of these details, glimpses into the family life I had been denied, cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Not because I still loved Elizabeth, but because I mourned the children we might have had, the honest life we might have lived. By the end of the 2nd month, we had everything we needed. Elizabeth had given us detailed explanations of her financial schemes, unwittingly confessing to embezzlement and fraud. She had documented her own deceptions in text messages and emails to both of us. She had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. It was time for phase 2. The trap was set for a Friday evening. Elizabeth believed she was joining me for a romantic weekend at our lake house, the same lake where we had been married and where she had later taken family photos with David and the twins. David told her he was taking the children to visit his parents, giving her the perfect opportunity to slip away to Boston. Instead, David brought the twins to stay with his sister and drove to my lake house, arriving hours before Elizabeth was due. We sat on the deck overlooking the water, Two men united by betrayal, finalizing the details of our confrontation. "Are you ready for this?" I asked him. David's face was grim. "I've been rehearsing what to say for 2 months, but no, I'm not ready. Those children are my world. Telling them their mother has been living a lie." He shook his head. "But they deserve the truth eventually. A version of it anyway." I handed him a glass of bourbon. "To the end of Elizabeth's double life." He clinked his glass against mine. "And to whatever comes after." We heard her car on the gravel driveway at exactly 5 o'clock. Elizabeth had always been punctual, one of the few genuine qualities she possessed. I moved to the living room, while David remained on the deck, out of sight but able to hear everything. She entered with a weekend bag and a bottle of champagne, her face lighting up when she saw me. The traffic was terrible, but nothing could keep me away. She moved to kiss me, and this time I let her, feeling nothing as her lips pressed against mine. "I've been looking forward to this all week," I said, taking the champagne. "Let's sit down. I have something important to ask you." Hope flashed in her eyes. Elizabeth always did love grand gestures. She probably thought I was going to formally ask her to come back home. We sat on the couch and I took her hands in mine. "These past 2 months have given me perspective," I began. "You're right that 10 years is too much to throw away. I want us to start fresh." "Oh, Alex." Tears filled her eyes. "That's all I want too. But first I need complete honesty between us. No more secrets." She nodded eagerly. "Of course. I've told you everything now." "Have you?" I asked softly. "What?" "About the money you've been systematically draining from my company to fund David's family business." Her hands stiffened in mine. "I explained those investments. They were all legitimate. What about the offshore account in the Caymans, the one with nearly $2 million that you've been funneling from both my company and David's family?" "Business?" The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about, don't you?" I released her hands and reached for a folder on the coffee table. "These are bank records, Elizabeth. Your name is all over them. Or should I say, names. Elizabeth Reynolds, Elizabeth Mercer, and Elizabeth Parker all appear on various accounts." "How did you get those?" Her voice had turned cold, calculating. "That's not the only thing I've gotten." I raised my voice slightly. "David, would you join us?" Elizabeth's head whipped around as David stepped in from the deck. She stood so quickly, she knocked over a glass, water spilling across the coffee table. "What is this?" she whispered, looking frantically between us. "This," I said calmly, "is the end of your charade." David moved to stand beside me, and Elizabeth took a step backward, her back hitting the wall. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed genuinely at a loss for words. "How long have you—" she began. "Since the day after I kicked you out," I said. "Turns out David is much easier to find than you might have hoped." "We know everything, Elizabeth," David added, his voice steady despite the muscle twitching in his jaw. "Every lie, every manipulation, every dollar you've stolen." She tried to regain her composure, smoothing her hair back with trembling hands. "You don't understand. I was trying to protect both of you. The investments were sound. Everyone benefited. Except the twins," David said coldly, "who grew up with a part-time mother because she was too busy playing house with another man." "And except me," I added, "who wanted children for years while—" "You told me you weren't ready, all while raising a family 300 miles away? Where are the children?" Panic edged into her voice. "What have you told them?" "They're with my sister," David said. "They don't know anything yet. But they will, Elizabeth, an age-appropriate version at least." "You can't do that to them," she cried. "They're just babies." "They're 7 years old," I corrected her. "Old enough to understand that Mommy has been lying to everyone. Old enough to start learning that actions have consequences." Elizabeth's eyes darted between us, then toward the door. I could almost see her calculating whether she could reach it before us, but there was nowhere for her to run. Not anymore. "What do you want?" she asked finally, her voice small. I gestured to the folder. "Full financial restitution, for starters. Every penny you diverted from my company returned with interest. Sole custody of the twins," David added. "With supervised visitation only, at my discretion. Both divorces filed immediately, citing fraud and bigamy," I continued. which, as you're probably aware, is a felony in both Massachusetts and Minnesota. And your full confession, David finished, to everything, which our lawyers are waiting to take in the morning. Elizabeth sank into a chair, her perfect facade crumbling completely. You would send me to prison, the mother of your children? She directed this to David, her voice breaking. You made your choice every day for 10 years, he replied. Every time you left them, every time you lied, every time you slipped into another man's bed while their pictures sat on your nightstand at home. She turned to me, desperation in her eyes. Alex, please, we can work this out. I'll give you anything you want. The money, the house, a divorce if that's what you need. But don't do this. Don't destroy everything. You destroyed everything, I said quietly, the moment you decided that neither of us deserved honesty. The moment you decided that your desires were more important than our lives. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. What happens now? Now, I said. You spend the night thinking about what you want to say to the lawyers tomorrow. The guest room is made up. Your phones and laptop will remain with us, as will your car keys. You're holding me prisoner. Indignation flared in her voice. David laughed harshly. No, Elizabeth. We're giving you one last night of comfort before your world implodes, which is more consideration than you ever gave either of us. As David and I left her alone in the living room, her sobs followed us. Out onto the deck. We stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the darkening lake. Do you think she'll try to run? David asked. Where would she go? We have her phones, her laptop, her purse, her car keys. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. I shook my head. Besides, she still thinks she can talk her way out of this. Elizabeth has never faced consequences for anything in her life. She doesn't know how. That night, as Elizabeth cried herself to sleep in the guest room, David and I sat up late, sharing the bottle of champagne she had brought and talking about the paths that had led us both to this moment. In another lifetime, under different circumstances, we might have been friends. Now, we were reluctant allies, bound by a common betrayal. Morning. Brought a subdued Elizabeth who requested coffee and asked to shower before meeting the lawyers. We allowed both, watching her warily as she attempted to rebuild her composure. When the lawyers arrived, mine, David's, and a court stenographer, she sat across from them with her chin held high, a shadow of her former confidence visible in her posture. For the next 3 hours she answered their questions, confirming the details of her decade-long deception. Yes, she had married both men knowingly. Yes, she had concealed the existence of her children from me. Yes, she had directed company funds without proper authorization. Yes, she maintained separate identities in different cities. By the end, even, the lawyers looked stunned by the scope and duration of her fraud. The stenographer's fingers had barely stopped moving throughout the confession. When it was over, when the documents were signed and the lawyers departed with promises of swift filings, Elizabeth stood alone in the center of the living room, woman stripped of her illusions. What happens to me now? She asked, her voice hollow. Now, David said, I take you back to Minneapolis where you will pack your personal belongings, nothing more, and leave my house. You will say goodbye to the children, telling them whatever version of the truth you think appropriate. Then, you will check into a hotel and wait for your lawyers to contact you about the criminal charges. And us? She asked, turning to me. There is no us, I replied. There never really was. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom watching Elizabeth plead guilty to multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and financial misconduct. She had negotiated a deal that kept her out of prison in exchange for full restitution and 5 years of probation. The bigamy charges had been dropped as part of the agreement, a kindness for the sake of the twins, who didn't need to see newspaper headlines about their mother's marital crimes. She looked different now, thinner. The designer. Clothes replaced by a modest suit, the perfect makeup gone, revealing the tired face of a woman in her 40s who had lost everything. When she turned and saw me in the gallery, her eyes held a question I couldn't answer. Why was I there? Perhaps to witness the end of the story, perhaps to remind myself that the woman I had loved had never really existed. Outside the courthouse, David waited with an update on the twins. We had developed an unlikely friendship over the months of legal proceedings, checking in on each other's healing processes as we both reconstructed our lives. James asked about her yesterday, he said, as we walked toward a nearby coffee shop. Wanted to know when Mummy was coming back from her work trip. What did you tell him? That sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that take a long time to fix. That Mommy loves him but can't live with us right now. He sighed heavily. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his mother has been living a double life? You don't, I replied. You wait until he's older, and you tell him as much of the truth as he needs. David nodded, then changed the subject. How's the company? Recovering. The restitution payments have helped, and Marcus has stepped up as CFO. We've implemented about 50 new financial controls to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. I smiled ruefully. Trust, but verify. My new motto. Mine too. He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Have you started dating yet? I laughed. God, no, you. The twins' kindergarten teacher has been dropping hints. I'm not ready, but it's nice to know life goes on. As we parted ways that afternoon, I realized that Elizabeth's betrayal, while devastating, had given me something unexpected: clarity. I knew now that I had been in love with an illusion, a carefully crafted persona designed to extract what she wanted from me. The real Elizabeth, whoever she was beneath the lies, remained a stranger. 6 months after that, I sold my construction company for a substantial profit and moved to the West Coast to start over. I sent David occasional texts checking on the twins, who were thriving despite the upheaval. Elizabeth, last I heard, was living in a small apartment in Chicago, working as an administrative assistant and seeing her children twice a month under David's watchful eye. Sometimes I wondered if she ever reflected on what she had lost: 2 husbands who had genuinely loved her, children who worshipped her, wealth, status, freedom. Had it been worth it? The thrill of deception, the power of maintaining 2 separate lives I would never know, and eventually I stopped caring about the answer. On the anniversary of the day I found that fateful postcard, I stood on the beach near my new home, watching. The sunset paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. I thought about the woman I had believed was my wife, about the life I had thought was real, about the future I had planned that would never come to pass. Then I took a deep breath of salt air, turned my back on the setting sun, and walked toward whatever came next, alone but finally free of lies. David still sends me pictures of the twins sometimes. They're growing up fast, resilient in the way that children often are. In their smiles, I occasionally catch glimpses of Elizabeth, the shape of their eyes, the curve of their cheeks. But there's an openness in their expressions that their mother never possessed, a genuineness that I hope they never lose. In my darker moments, I wonder if Elizabeth is constructing new lies somewhere, creating new personas, drawing new victims into her web. But those moments grow fewer as time passes. The anger has faded, leaving only a distant sadness for what might have been if she had chosen honesty over deception. In the end, the most valuable lesson from my decade with Elizabeth was simple but profound. Truth, however painful, is always less destructive than even the most beautiful lie. It's a lesson I carry forward as I build a new life. One day, one honest interaction, one genuine relationship at a time. And sometimes, when I least expect it, I find myself grateful for that. Misdelivered postcard that shattered my world but ultimately set me free.